Our favorite zero RB picks for 2025. That's what we're talking about today on the RotoViz Fantasy Football Show. I'm delighted to once again be joined by Peter Overzet. He did come on earlier this week and we went through some of his favorite targets from the early rounds. But what we're going to look at today is maybe where does the zero RB window start and who are some of his favorite zero RB picks on those rosters for 2025. The landscape in general, Pete, here for zero RB in 2025. We talked a little bit at the landscape in general at the start of the previous show. Are you finding any changes to the approach overall in drafting this year? Is it more about trying to get those key tendencies and traits off a zero RB roster altogether by the end of your draft board? Again, a bit like I started off the show the last day. What has changed for you this year?
Yeah, I do think it's interesting in that I don't find myself getting funneled to true zero RB builds quite as much as I did in previous years, partly because I think there's some pretty nice values on running backs in, say, round 3, round 5 and 6. We didn't even get a chance on the previous show to discuss a guy like Trevion Henderson as well. Some of these rookies who don't necessarily fall in the exact zero RB windows that we might be discussing, I think are pretty interesting. However, I still think that there are intriguing running back selections throughout the draft and that zero RB remains incredibly viable. I think it's just understanding the other value pockets of the draft and making sure that you're kind of optimizing where you're actually making these targets. Because if you do force yourself into an extreme build, I think sometimes it means you're making suboptimal selections because you're hurrying and catching up at another position where it's like, oh, if I need these zero running back targets, I might have to take them 40 picks ahead of ADP because I'm done taking wide receivers and tight ends. There's nothing left for me to do. So that's the one consideration that I think, drafters need to have front of mind this year.
Yeah, and if we look at some of the rookies, like for example, Hampton, you mentioned Henderson, then you get RJ Harvey going in round 6. Do you find that, like, so I think in previous years, again, going back to like what has changed, I think some of these rookies are probably going in the 8th round. People have just got sharper as to, how to value them entering their rookie season. Would you agree with that usually those names would be like, the evolution of the dead zone and their profiles that usually wouldn't have been in the dead zone, but they're kind of going in those traditional dead zone rounds now?
Yeah, and I think people, drafters for the most part they're really good at weighing all of the factors, right? Like, what is the depth chart? How much competition? What is the profile of the player? Like, a great example is one of my favorite zero RB targets this year, which is Bhayshul Tuten on the Jags. I mean, he's getting pretty expensive because drafters understand that his profile, his explosiveness, coupled with the ambiguity of the Jags backfield and the trajectory we think this offense is on, has league-winning potential. And you have to pay a premium for that. I wouldn't be surprised to see him as a top 100 pick here in the coming weeks, although he did just have a high-profile fumble there.
I was going to come in and say that, can we decrease the ADP just a little bit, with that fumble?
It will. I've already seen screenshots of him dropping. But I think I just use him as an example of drafters are more willing to take the leap of faith if they think the ingredients are there. That said, there are still players, we can find the Bucky Irving archetype where people are a little skeptical of the draft capital. They're a little skeptical of the depth chart. And I think that does still give us opportunity to draft exciting players in situations that maybe seem less attractive than they actually are.
I would agree. I think when we look through those early rounds that I kind of hinted at, I do think there'll be more players in that range that I'll tend to look to pick at running back versus in previous years. And Ben Gretsch likes to use the word detour. I think there'll be some detours potentially for some of those younger running backs as we work our way through those. For you, love this question every year, and because we have an evolution of the draft ADP, where does zero RB rounds start?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how everyone always... So I think about this of two things. Like, I'm generally, if you have not selected a running back through 4 rounds, I kind of consider that zero RB. If you're taking an RJ Harvey, a Chuba as your first running back, I'm inclined to say that I think some people might push the definition.
So you're going to give me a zero RB build and I can take RJ Harvey in the 5th?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
I'll take that.
The whole thing, luckily we don't have to debate this as much
Yeah, we
anymore
don't.
as we used to. But to me, it's more about the amount of capital you spend. Like if you take RJ Harvey in the 5th and then you don't take your second running back until, let's say, round 10, and then you built, like, to me, that's just a quintessential zero RB room. You've spent one pick through 10 rounds or 9
Yeah.
rounds on a running back, but people love getting caught up in it. I think it's interesting, though, when we talk about zero RB targets, my mind goes to who are the running backs after pick 100. Trevion Henderson would fall outside of, say, a zero RB window. Like clearly you could start your room with him in a zero RB build. But for me, the targets are like, all right, who are the sleepers that no one is on after pick 100 that you could start building out for a zero RB team?
Yeah, that's where I would generally say, like, traditionally, if you're building it out, you're probably like round 8 and beyond. That's where I'm trying to push it. But I do think with the way things are shaping up this year, I would tend to agree with you. And where I would be looking is like the RJ Harvey, Chuba Hubbard kind of tier there. And I would be kind of thinking like they're the 2 specific players in round 5 that I'd be willing to make that change for. But let's look at it then a little bit deeper, because we have quite a few veterans going in that round 7 range outside of Caleb Johnson, Tony Pollard, DeAndre Swift, Aaron Jones. So I think we'll bypass those guys. Then you have Brian Robinson Jr., Isaiah Pacheco, round 8. You're into round 9 then. I do think Skattebo can be fit in there, and I think some people will be on the other side of that train, and Tyrone Tracy fits in for them. Out of those 2 guys, have you a strong preference for the Giants running backs?
I do. I've been almost exclusively drafting Cam Skattebo right now. I'm waiting for an opportunity to buy back in on Tyrone Tracy. I find his price to still be a little expensive for my taste. And the comparison I've been using is the Jags backfield, right? We have both Cam Skattebo and Tuten who go early round 4, both really intriguing profiles that I know RotoViz loved. And we look at the incumbent backs. The market has pushed Travis Etienne down to pick 124, and yet Tyrone Tracy is still at 103. And to me, I want to see like Tracy closer to Etienne there, and then I can start kind of buying the dip and playing this backfield both ways. But if you're going to have these guys right next to each other, like give me the rookie every single time in that situation. So I'm definitely on Team Cam, at least with these current prices.
Then you get Jaylen Warren, Jordan Mason. I'm interested in your thoughts on the Caleb Johnson, Jaylen Warren. I think Jaylen Warren fits like perfectly with this kind of profile and target that you want to have. Obviously, there is a rookie coming in kind of on top of him that may make that a little bit more challenging. Is Warren somebody that you're targeting?
Yeah, I was talking about this with Pat Carrain on Best Ball Breakfast earlier this week, and one of the things I was getting excited about with both Warren and Caleb Johnson is I think the range of outcomes for this backfield is more exciting this year compared to with Najee, because I think with Najee, they were always going to play specific roles and they were always going to be in a timeshare. Like Jaylen Warren was never going to take away the early down work and the goal line from Najee, and Najee was never going to take all the passing work and up-tempo stuff. However, with a rookie in Caleb Johnson, we widen this range of outcomes where he could just be bad. He could just not be good, and Jaylen Warren is the guy they have to ride. Or Caleb Johnson could be a 3-down bell cow who's even better than Najee that pushes Jaylen Warren to the periphery. Now, while I don't think either of those are the most likely outcome, it gives us opportunities to hit a league-winning bell cow back in playing both of those in a way that just wasn't possible with Najee. So I'm warming up to taking more Caleb. I do think Jaylen Warren is a nice price, but I like the idea that I'm not just getting a timeshare back. I might be able to hit a home run with a bell cow.
We also get into some kind of like we're working through some of the profiles we like, also some of the younger players, but then you get into like Najee Harris, who's now with the Chargers. You get Zach Charbonnet, but then you get to Tuten and Javonte Williams. There's been a lot of talk on the RotoViz shows over the last 4 weeks or so since the NFL draft about Jalen Blue. So we might touch on Javonte in a minute, but Tuten, is he your like priority 1 target here for your zero RB draft, or just drafts in general? Like if you go and you get, let's say you take Jamar Gibbs in the first, is he like he's somebody you want to get on as many rosters as possible?
Yeah, and I mean, I can back this up with my actual results. I just checked. I've drafted 52 teams since the NFL draft, and my number 1 most drafted running back is Tuten, 30.8%. So again, about 1/3 of my teams, I've gravitated to him. And yeah, I always am hesitant to like overfit to previous examples, but this situation with the Jags reminds me a lot of the Dolphins scenario 2 years ago, where in this scenario, Travis Etienne is kind of the Raheem Mostert, Tuten is the Devon Achane rookie, and I think you could say Tank Bigsby is like the Jeff Wilson in that scenario. And all three of those running backs at the time offered intrigue in what they could provide. And I remember heading into that year, I kind of had a motto of I want one Dolphin in every draft because I wasn't confident on who the winner was going to be, but I thought there would be a huge winner because the market was basically saying, I'm hesitant on all of these guys because of the ambiguity. Now, I think you can argue the Miami system is a way better running system that was going to facilitate more points than maybe the Jags. That's fair, but there's similar ingredients here where I want to be in on both Tuten and this cheaper Travis Etienne price tag because I think the winner here could be an absolute scorching league winner, where they have a top 15 overall season and you're getting these guys after pick 100. So I remain very excited about Tuten.
Yeah, I think the offensive scheme and so on should be improved as well this year versus last year. But it is interesting. You get Travis Etienne then going one round, kind of 6 to 8 picks later in round 11, and then that's followed up 2 rounds later in round 13 by Tank Bigsby. Are the other guys then complete fades, or are you putting them into any rosters?
I have been drafting ETN. Like I said, he'll fall past ADP too. Like I've gotten him at pick 130, 135 in the same way I feel about Ramondre, right? Where it's like, obviously Trevion Henderson has the upside to run away with that backfield, but there comes a price where I'm like, hey, there's going to be some standalone value. And the other thing is we always think about contingent value in favor of the fun way, right? It's like, oh, if Travis Etienne got hurt, it'd be Tuten to the moon. It's like, well, what if Tuten gets hurt? Well, Travis Etienne is going to be a thing. Or what if Trevion Henderson gets hurt? Well, we're back to Ramondre Belcow. So at pick 130, 135, I'm still happy to take stabs on that backfield. I will say, though, I have not been drafting Tank Bigsby. He feels kind of like the odd man out to me. But I still want to have some humility as I think through that situation. It's a new coaching staff. We don't know how they feel about these guys. I should probably sprinkle him in a little bit, but I haven't gotten there yet.
It is interesting too, to talk about how the backfield is by ADP. It's Tuten, then ETN, then Bigsby. But I do think the likes of like Javonte Williams, who goes between ETN and Tuten in drafts, like him, I would go as far to say ETN. Maybe even Stevenson. Like I think Najee Harris, like some of these guys in the past would have been like multiple round. They would be the prototypical dead zone guys that would be sitting there. But with that in mind, then, like I mentioned, Javonte Williams in round 10, you get Jaydon Blue in round 11. Have you been drinking the blue flavored Kool-Aid over the last couple of weeks?
I have, in partly because I just kind of assumed that the market would do with this situation what they've done with some of the other backfields we talked about, right? Cam Skattebo, the rookie, going ahead of Tracy. Tuten, the rookie, going ahead of ETN. This is the rare situation where we're still pricing the veteran as the more expensive guy. So now you're giving us the opportunity to buy the mystery box of the rookie. And we know who Javonte Williams is at this point. We can almost guarantee what we're going to get. And it's some version of what we saw from Zeke Elliott, last year. And maybe the best case scenario is that's what Javonte is, right?
That hurts. That does hurt after all. Like we loved him for years, but he's in that trajectory. He's even going to be wearing the Cowboys star this year to do it.
Yeah. So I guess I'm content taking Jaydon Blue until he gets steamed up to a range where he's more expensive than Javonte. He's going against other guys that I want to take. At that point, I'll start to do the Javonte thing like I did with ETN, like I'm willing to do with Ramondre Stevenson. Hey, if you're going to give me him 140, some values. But as of now, I feel like Javonte's a pretty easy fade and Jaydon Blue should be a premium target because I think he's going to inch up as the summer progresses. Up. I'd rather grab my shares now while he's still in the 130s than wait until he's a top 100 pick.
Yeah, this is the part that scares me because I do think like we'll get to training camp and there'll be positive reports and then it'll move up and up and up and then he will be going, in the 9th round. He's a player I think, again, multiple years ago would have been like in the 14th, 15th. I think like it's just a case of like people are more in tune with more information as we go through the NFL draft and moving forward here. Now, I think like somebody who had no huge buzz pre-NFL draft to be going as an 11th round pick in best ball, 4 weeks after the draft is something that we wouldn't have seen. But I think there's a lot of upside there. There is also just, again, with these players that we like to hype up with RJ Harvey, with Jaydon Blue, with Tuten, there is the downside as well. Like we talked about Kaleb Johnson, maybe he just doesn't work out as a rookie. Maybe these guys don't either, but yeah, Blue, I think at this cost is going to be interesting because I agree with Pete. It's going to continue to move up. We get into a wider range now. You know, we're into round 12 through round 18. Kind of going to open the door. I might hit you with some names, but is there any players here again? Who's the number one guy in these late rounds? And I kind of feel between round 12, round 14, there's some names there, but you're kind of like, good to skip those. Are you picking out any of those kind of guys in those 3 rounds, or are you kind of more looking around 15 and beyond?
Yeah, a little bit more around 15 and beyond. You know, one thing, because I'm going to be drafting all summer, and this is the start, I am trying to skew my 0 running back selections toward the more safer bets. And when I say safer, I mean, I feel confident about their position on the depth chart. And so I really wrestle with some of these players who could be the running back 3 versus the running back 2. You know, those situations have historically gotten us in trouble. A prime example, I remember when Zach Evans was on the Rams and we were all really excited about his talent. And then we were just flat out wrong about where he was on the depth chart. He was a total 0. McVay had no interest in it. So as much as we like all of these rookies, there is the potential for that to be the case. And so a couple of the 2 names who have been standing out to me in this regard are Will Shipley. I think he's an awesome 0 RB target. In one, we like his profile, right? Explosive guy, catches passes. We saw him flash a little in the playoffs, but no Kenny Gainwell there is so huge for me because he was a guy that the team relied on in 3rd down situations, in important situations, and he's gone, and he was not backfilled with any one of that archetype. They added A.J. Dillon, and you as a Packers fan know A.J. Dillon ain't out there to catch passes and pass protect. That's Will Shipley. And so to me, his spot on this depth chart and that contingent upside is awesome. And then the other guy, back to Green Bay here, I'm feeling better about Marshawn Lloyd.
Oh, yeah. I was going to pitch him to you.
Yeah, you could tell me about what they told us in the NFL draft by not, spending a premium pick on a running back. But to me, that speaks to their confidence in Marshawn Lloyd being their RB2. So I've been gravitating to those 2 a lot. And I'm going to get to the rookies. Like I promise I'm going to end up having a bunch of DJ Giddens and Jarquez Hunters and Devin Neals. But I kind of prefer those other guys until I get more information.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting about Shipley and Lloyd, and Shipley was one of my most drafted players in 2024, so that didn't work out all that great with Saquon Barkley, trying to break the game completely. But you have Barkley going at the 102 versus Shipley in the 16th, and then you also have at the late second Josh Jacobs going versus the 16th round Marshawn Lloyd. And I do think in those situations you want to be targeting those particular players where there's a player going in the first 2 to 3 rounds and there's a big gap then to that secondary option. Just you never want to root for injuries, but the ADP gap may be much closer come the end of the season, and particularly if injuries open things up. There is a talent gap obviously between those particular players, but it becomes interesting. The rookies that are going down here, and then some of them will even be going undrafted, but some of when we're looking at like dynasty shares that I've picked up a lot of over the last couple of weeks, with some of the names like a Jarquez Hunter talking about the Rams and players ending up as a 0, but he's somebody I've drafted a lot of in dynasty formats. And then you have Rashad Smith now with the Chiefs. We're looking at situations there. There's a much tougher battle for Hunter to usurp the starter in Kyron Williams. But again, that's a 3rd round versus a 17th round gap in ADP between those 2 guys. But that Chiefs depth chart does, if Rashad Smith can do anything here, that Chiefs depth chart shouldn't be too hard to climb up.
Yeah, and he's another one where it's like every bone in my body wants to just click him in every draft. And yet I also just like want to back up, and I'm like, Eli Mitchell is still on this roster. Kareem Hunt is still on this roster. Do you need 2 injuries for him to get there? The one thing that's exciting, I think, about him is the path to being the pass catching back seems pretty clear. He can be the Samaje Perine. He can be the Jerick McKinnon. The issue is over the years, that role has been fairly useless in the regular season. And then like in the playoffs, it's like, okay, we're going to use McKinnon. We're going to use P. Ryan a good bit. So I struggle to think through like the true ceiling outcomes for him. But the fact
is that based on bad coaching decisions or based on talent?
I mean, maybe. And the Chiefs have just been stubborn, right? Like
they're playing like they don't care what just running back. Let's play. Who's the worst runner? Let's look at the metrics. Let's look at the underlying data. Who's the worst running back that we can play on this team at the moment? And then they make him the starter.
And they also have the history of slow playing rookies. They slow played Rashee Rice. They slow played Xavier Worthy. Yeah. They threw CEH to the Wolves right away when he was a rookie, and then that didn't work out. So if we hear good stuff on Brashard Smith when OTAs and training camp are going, I'll be ready to pounce. But to me, that's one where I want to hear, hey, Brashard Smith's been outplaying, these veteran backs. He looks so much better than Kareem Hunt and Eli Mitchell. Like if we can start to get some of that, he'll be firmly on my radar, but I'm playing it a little cautious with the Chiefs backfield right now.
Yeah, but with particularly the buzz that Kansas City Chiefs players get in the news cycle, if that is the case, we're going to be looking at him in the 14th round or above versus the 18th round as things currently stand. But that runs through. Any players that we didn't hit on today, Pete, that you want to give some airtime to, or do you think we had all the names that you're kind of thinking about drafting through that back half of the draft?
One other player that's at the top of my running back exposures who is cheap and I think meets the criteria I'm looking for, as I feel pretty good about his RB2 status right now, is Roschon Johnson behind DeAndre Swift. Obviously, they didn't add anything through free agency in the draft. DeAndre Swift, I think is a fine pick in this offense at this point, just knowing how explosive it should be. But as a contingent upside pick, Roschon Johnson to me is pretty intriguing because he does have that 3-down skill set, right? He'll catch some passes. I think they don't mind him at the goal line either.
No, they use him in there. He has the size and at the goal line. Yeah.
So I know his career hasn't been quite what people were hoping for when he came out. But I think he's kind of a sneaky contingent back. I think he's the RB2 on the roster, and we just want access to this offense. There's not a lot of cheap Bears pieces. They're all pretty expensive outside of Roschon. So he's a guy I've been taking a good bit as well.
Yeah, he ended up last season with 6 rushing touchdowns, just 150 rushing yards. So the yards per average, they're not very good on 55 carries, but he had 16 receptions as well. He had 34 receptions the year prior. Swift has been very, very disappointing. Over the last couple of seasons, I was excited about his move from the Lions to the Eagles, and then obviously he gets a chance at the Bears. But with the trajectory of his career over the last couple of years, he does feel like a player who, like you mentioned, he's a fine pick if you want to make it there, but he also feels like he could really be a dead zone back here as we look at him going in the 7th round. He's going in the range with Tony Pollard, Aaron Jones. I think they could get into trouble, but that has been a fun little run through the back half of drafts to see some of Pete's favorite targets for 2025. We are going to finish it up there. I mentioned on the previous show, which I would urge you to go back and check out if you haven't done so already, we went through some of his favorite best ball draft targets from kind of mainly the early rounds, looking through that you can find him on social media. If you aren't already, I think if you're a RotoViz longtime listener, I'm sure you are subscribed on YouTube as well with Peter Overzet on Twitter. You can find him at Fantasy Life and of course Ship Chasing as well. But as we close out, anything you want to let the listeners know? Should they subscribe to the PO Box newsletter?
Yeah, that's I write a couple newsletters, obviously the Fantasy Life one, fantasy football focus, but I just have my personal newsletter. I drop it on Fridays. Sometimes I'll talk about, best ball and kind of the landscape and stuff like that. But a lot of times it's about health, fitness, dad life, content creation, any kind of ideas, things I'm watching. So if you are interested in the things I'm interested in, then that would be a good spot. Free newsletter. I drop it in your inbox every Friday AM.
Yeah, check it out. So that is going to finish us up. My name is Colm Kelly. You can follow me on socials at Overtime Ireland. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast feed to get these episodes once they are available. You can also check out the shows I did this week with Sean Siegel over on the RotoViz Overtime podcast feed. Until we are back, have a good one.